Today I have Mike Mezei on the line with me. Mike is from Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada, and is currently joining us from Texas. Mike is a past champion of the Canadian Junior, former winner of the Alberta Amateur, PGA Tour qualifying school stage winner, and also a winner on the Canadian Tour. Today I'll be talking to Mike about his perspective on the mental strategies that have made him most successful in those achievements. Thanks for joining me, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Brett.
All right. Mike, I'd like to start talking about goals. Do you, I should say, write down your goals?
I do write down my goals. It's something I do towards the start of the year, but I'll preface that by saying that when I do write them down, I kind of just put them away for the rest of the year. I don't really think about them. Most of the stuff that I'm kind of focused on is more what I need to do to get there, whereas, the kind of the end destination is kind of something that's nice to think about, but, doesn't help me much for day-to-day preparation. So I would definitely say prepare or set goals at the start of the year for what I want to do, but then I kind of make those goals and forget about them, so to speak.
Okay. What type of goals do you track, and how frequently do you monitor and measure them? It sounds like you kind of set them and forget about them. Is that the case for all of them, or does it change?
It kind of depends. I mean, last year I kept some statistics on short game that I kind of had some goals and whatnot. So, I was kind of keeping track, week to week and see how I was doing or see what my stats were for the most part. But, for the majority of my goals, they're not really, they're my left way from 75% to 82% or something like that, up and down or something like that. I mean, that's not really a statistic that like numbers like that. It's more, I guess some of my goals are probably more global than that.
Okay.
I feel like if you're tackling some of the bigger issues and improving on that, it kind of trickles down into all the areas. So I'd say my goals are probably a bit more globally based than maybe statistically based at this point.
Okay. And what do you see as the, sort of the ultimate purpose of your goals in the run of a year?
Well, like anyone else, you kind of take stock at the end of the year and see where you, where you fell short or where you succeeded, and from there, develop a plan that how you can improve and how you can keep your strengths strong and improve your weaknesses.
What are your thoughts on visualization? Do you visualize your big and long-term goals?
Yeah, to be honest, we talked about it a bit about this before, but I'm not a big fan of visualization and the fact that I don't sit there before my round and visualize, okay, I'm going to be left, right, wind, pin left, and I got this club on this line, so I'm going to hit the shot. There's just too many variables. It's just not something you can predict. I think it's very, for me anyways, tiring and not very useful. But I think the better term I like to think of is imagination. Imagine yourself being at the Masters or being at the U.S. Open or having the putt to win, I think is a big thing. But, visualizing your round the next day, I don't think is helpful. I haven't found it helpful for me. But you hear a lot of great players talk about, when they had kids, they'd have this putt to the Masters or, like this putt to the U.S. Open and stuff like that. So I think imagining yourself in that position and seeing yourself in that position is very, very powerful. But I don't use a lot of visualization, I guess, the night before or something like that. And then as far as on the golf course, you set up and you pick your shot. Of course you visualize the shot, like you can kind of see the shot you're going to hit, but I'm not someone that does that and, sits there behind the ball for 10 seconds visualizing the full flight of the shot and how it's going to land and, all that kind of stuff. That's not kind of players, and it's kind of some people like to do it like that. Some people are more, I guess, like me, where like you just step up and you just kind of see and feel the shot. It's not something that's even, something you can put in words. It's more of a somatic or like a kinesthetic feel or something like that, if you would.
Okay, yeah. So with that, with imagination, are you, I'm just trying to separate it a little bit further, but you're kind of thinking about yourself in a sense winning the Masters or hitting shots on the PGA Tour, that sort of thing. Is that right then?
Yeah, I kind of see, I guess, my imagination, I see myself on the golf course, let's say playing Riviera at the Northern Trust Open or playing, the Masters or something like that, on-course stuff, being there and playing against the players you'd want to be playing against and on that kind of stage. And then as well, also off the course stuff, interacting with people and whatnot, how, people would treat you differently if you were a Masters champion or a PGA Tour player, stuff like that. So it kind of, I guess my imagination kind of works, I guess, on and off the golf course, I guess, into the future, so to speak, seeing where I want to go.
Okay. And, what's the effectiveness of that imagination? And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is it really to draw you towards that achievement? Is that ultimately it?
Yeah, I think so, in some respects. I just think, if you can imagine seeing yourself there, I think it just kind of changes your self-image a bit. You start getting used to thinking about that. You start seeing yourself as someone, as that kind of a player. Whereas, if you imagine yourself all the time as being someone that maybe only has another year left to play, and then you got to get a job or something like that, you know what I mean? I think that's, it kind of draws you towards that as well. So, it's just planting the seeds, I guess, in your subconscious for your further actions and behavior.
Yeah, okay. This is kind of quite deep content when we get into some of the discussions on sports psychology, but, to go a little bit deeper on that, what's your experience with self-talk and affirmations, and how does self-talk and affirmations fit into your imagination of future goals? Is that a part of it?
Well, I'd say it's self-talk, maybe not as much, only because I feel like when you start talking to yourself and you're not present in the present moment, I think self-talk, either positive or negative, isn't something that I found is very effective. I feel it takes you away from the present. As far as affirmations, it works for some people great. I'm a pretty skeptical person, and for me to go look myself in the mirror and say, hey, I'm a Masters champion, and I'm a great person, I'm a great player today, and I'm going to go make 12 birdies or something like that. It just doesn't, for me, add up. But for some reason, for me, something that's worked better is, imagining myself in those situations, how I would act, how I would do, and then, ultimately you're not going to believe, you're in that situation, so I think that you actually are, right? But when you're imagining, it changes your ability, changes your actions, changes your behavior to the point where, you become that kind of a player. I think at the end of it, your self-image and your actions are going to change based on, what you imagine yourself to be.
Yeah. Well, I can appreciate your comments about looking in the mirror. That does seem a little bit awkward, but I guess, for some people it does reinforce some positive things, but obviously not for everyone.
I'm all for whatever works. People find that works for them and that improves their self-image and, what they're doing and changes their behavior in a positive way, but hey, go for it. Yeah,
for sure. And that's the purpose of these interviews, is to understand on an individual basis what works for each person. So appreciate that. What's your, on the lighter side, what's your favorite book on golf psychology, and what did you get out of that?
Probably my favorite book on golf psychology is a book called Extraordinary Golf by a guy named Fred Shoemaker. I don't even know if it would technically be a golf psychology book so much as a book about learning and whatnot, but I just think it's a really fascinating way to look at learning. I think that 99% of the teaching out there, especially on how to play the game and the golf swing, is just like kind of old school and been covered over and over and over again and continually repackaged in different forms and different brands, whether it be a stack and tilt or this method or that method, but Fred really talks about, kind of what is more of the heart of the game, how you learn, how much better people are than they think they are, and, where that kind of stuff comes from. So, if you haven't read that book, I definitely recommend Extraordinary Golf. It's a great, gives you just a new look on the game, and just, like the title of the book said, the art of the possible, just kind of shows you what else is possible out there, despite all the other stuff you see in the golf magazines and on the commentators on TV and stuff like that. Yeah, for sure. I think the physical side of golf is overdone, the mechanics, and there's certainly a lot less on the inner workings of your mind and how it helps you to be a top performer. So
Well, it's a good recommendation on that book. How do you define context, and how do you use it to your advantage as a strategy, a mental strategy in golf?
Yeah, that's something we talked about today too, and context for me is, I think context is huge. I think it goes into, ties in with imagination, and the context in which you see yourself and the context in which you see your environment ultimately determines your actions and your behavior and your emotions. A good example I was the other day, in the context, if you were pulling in a golf course for a nice round of golf in the afternoon, and you're pulling up to a nice club, parking lot right in front of the clubhouse, and some 18-year-old pump with tattoos came ripped in, some sports car pulled right by you and stole your spot and ran to the clubhouse, you'd think, man, what a jerk. But if I told you that guy was someone with insulin for his mom because his mom was a diabetic, was in shock, you'd have a different view of what just happened. So I think the context you view yourself and your environment is huge. It's like one of those things I talk about is a global thing where, if you see yourself, it's, for me, for example, I'll give you a personal example. For me, for a context thing, I just turned 30 this year. A lot of people are like, wow, like you're 30 years old, you haven't got your PGA Tour card yet. What are you doing? You should get a job, all this kind of stuff. A lot of people say stuff like that. There's one context you can look at it in, and like day to day, like, every single defeat on the golf course, every small little thing goes wrong, you're like, wow, like this is what am I doing, blah, blah, blah. Or you can look at it, say, the traditional prime for most players is 30 to 45 years old, and I just turned 30, so I'm just starting my prime, working hard. I just feel like now that I'm starting to figure out what makes me tick, what makes me a good player, and, I'm setting up for a great career in those years. I mean, that's just, the example, you can imagine the difference, the two contexts and how they affect my behavior. If I think the first way, I'm not going to want to put in the extra effort. I'm not going to, I'm going to think this is a lost cause or, whatnot. Whereas the second way of viewing things, that context and the way I view myself in my environment is, hey, like, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to do everything I can to make myself successful. So, I think anytime you're in the kind of place where you're losing energy and your context and the way you view yourself and your environment is draining you, then you need to change how you look at things. And I mean, that's just one of those things. Like, I think it's huge. If you change your context, I mean, that changes the way you practice, change the way you view yourself, change your habits. Like, I mean, it's a very, very powerful change that affects multiple facets of what you do every day. As opposed to be, okay, I got to improve the way I focus, the way I practice. Okay, I got to improve how much I go to the gym. I got to improve, what I mean? So I think context is for me anyways, has been probably one of the biggest tools, if not the biggest.